Welcome, Hawk fans. Welcome to another episode of Hawk Talk. I am your host, Colin Cole. And of course, we have another awesome episode, and we're going to be talking about the number 17 Iowa Hawkeyes playing against the number 25 Kentucky Wildcats down in Orlando, Florida, in the VRBO Citrus Bowl. But before we get to that, I got to introduce my guest host, of course, the all Big Ten member, the starting offensive tackle for a number of years, the guy who puts you in a home if you're looking for one up there in Chicago, Illinois. But more importantly than all that, the guy that brings so much insight to the show and really has the stats to really back it up. So welcome to the show, the man, the myth, the legend, David Porter. Thank you for joining me today, sir. Thank you, David.
Thank you for having me, dude. It's always a pleasure to be here with you. Spend some time and talk about our Hawks.
No question, man. So we are. Shoot, it is actually New Year's Eve, right? We are countdown hours to New Year's Day, less than 24 hours from the Hawks game against the Kentucky Wildcats. And David, I would say that the last few games have been very difficult. This one is equally as difficult against a top 25 opponent in the Kentucky Wildcats. And let's not get it twisted. This Kentucky Wildcat program is really good. I mean, they rank 25th in the nation. However, statistics, especially if you look at their individual statistics, tell a whole nother story in terms of what kind of player, what kind of team we got to deal with. The Wildcats gave up the football 22 times. Although, even though, and I think that's one of the major things that kind of forced some of the stumbles for them early on in the season. They gave the football 22 times, which gives Iowa some hope, particularly when combined with the Hawkeye skills at forcing turnovers. Iowa forced 30 turnovers this season, including 24 interceptions. David, I wanted to jump into the defensive side first because we got to talk about this Wildcat offense, man. And the big part about that is the fact that we, on our side, have a few guys that are going to be missing the game. As you know, David, Matt Hankins had surgery a couple weeks ago. He's obviously done. Terry Roberts will not make the game. He's had a nagging injury here for it feels like a few months now. It's really been about 2, I think. But he's not going to be able to go, and Xavier Williams won't be able to go either. But other than that, other than those injuries over at the corner position, the entire team seems to be ready to go. David, how do we fare against this Kentucky Wildcat offense? They're a pretty legit team, man.
Yeah, they are that. The Kentucky Wildcat team, that offense, it's a high-powered offense, right? When you look at those guys there, they're actually having a very special year when you look at them statistically. You alluded to their plays that they have going on, or the things they have going on right now offensively. Now, this is the second time in school history that they've had a 2,000-yard passer, a 1,000-yard running back, and a 1,000-yard receiver on the same team at the same time. Second time in school history, right? They are having some monumental things happen over there. Their quarterback has 2,593 yards for the season, right? So that pass attack is something fierce. They are actually really good over there on offense, and they know how to move the ball. All right, we're looking here with these guys. They're averaging 431 yards a game, right? Compare that to our offense, we're at 298. And they have a fairly balanced attack. Right, when you were looking at their pass, they're at 225, and you're looking at their rushing, they're at 206. That's per game. These guys know how to move the ball, and Mark has these guys over there believing. I mean, they're riding a 15-game non-conference win streak right now, and they're continuing to just go out there and pound away. Right, when you look at the rushing game, Chris Rodriguez, that gentleman there has 1,272 yards rushing for the season so far. That's only on 205 carries. So that offensive line is creating some holes. Their schemes on offense are creating some opportunities for this man to gain some yards out there. that's going to be something with the things that we're missing on defense. Some of the guys we're missing out there. We're going to have people step up, and we're going to need some people to really step up and the next man in mentality to have to recognize some things that they're probably not used to seeing. It's a spread offense, so the Kentucky has a really good chance of seeing some good plays out there, some big plays out there. They start gashing us, and if they can start to sustain drives, we've seen what happened in the past. Our defense, if they continue to take plays, they'll get tired. They'll get gashed again.
Yeah, this Kentucky offense, you mentioned Rodriguez over 1,000 yards, Robinson over 1,000 yards in receiving. So highly, highly potent offense. And of course, you made mention to the quarterback, Will Lewis, who has had a tremendous season, throwing for over 2,500 yards and 23 touchdowns compared to only 12 interceptions. So this is not going to be, by any stretch of the imagination, and a Big Ten team that like some of the ones that we faced going down the stretch. This is going to be a well-prepared, highly potent offense, and led by Will Lewis, who, again, like I said, only threw 16 interceptions and had a 149% quarterback rating, which is tops in the SEC, one of the top in the SEC. So this is not an offense that is afraid to push the ball down the field. They have no problems with getting the ball to the multiple receivers. We talked about Wan'Dale Robinson, who has 94 receptions for 1,100 yards and 7 touchdowns, and that's tremendous in and of itself. But then you have supporting cast and Josh Allen, who also has 601 yards. But that really just shows their commitment to pounding the ball and utilizing the young man that we talked about there, Rodriguez, out of the backfield, and then being able to spread the ball around and get the ball to Robinson in the passing game. So those two are going to be some of the guys that are going to have to get keyed in on, and if we're going to really have an opportunity to win this game. But beyond that, man, I wanted to start with that side of the ball because we know, the injuries that are on defensive side, guys having to fill in, next man up mentality, like you mentioned. It's going to be a difficult task against this vaunted Kentucky offense. Switching gears, we got to jump onto the Hawkeye offense, which of course we have some news. Clearly, we all know there has been some developments over the last few weeks. Tyler Goodson opted out of this bowl game. Goodson rushed for 1,151 yards of Iowa's 1,558 yards on the season. The rest of the Hawkeyes only managed to rush 1.8 yards per carry. Listening to Coach Ferentz's press conference, he talked about the plan at running backs, which with the departure of Tyler Goodson was to go with Gavin Williams and LaShawn. And we have faith in both those guys. LaShawn really hasn't played much, but he's practiced really well. He caught our attention last spring and really started to ascend. And then getting Kelly Martin back is just a bonus for us. And happy to say he's had 2 good weeks of practice. Right now, he looks like he's in shape and looks like he'll definitely add some depth at on the special teams as well as in the running back position. But without Goodson, this running attack is without its top rusher. And like I made mention to a while ago, his 1,151 yards tops our rushing core. And really, there's only about 400 yards of rushing game amongst the entire rest of that offense. So what does the departure of Tyler Goodson from this offense do to this offense moving forward, especially into the Citrus Bowl?
It makes it really difficult for us to run the ball. And by that, if we can establish the run like we've been talking about all season, it makes us one-dimensional. All right. And one of the things that I hear over and over again when we were at the games, when I go to games, I talk to fans, I talk to people that watch Iowa, It's like with Iowa, you know what you're going to get. All right, we become one-dimensional. That makes it really tough for us to move the ball. And we have an offense right now that's already struggling. We saw what happened at Michigan, when we were there, and it's almost like they knew what we were going to do. And then now you make us one-dimensional with the loss of our star running back for this bowl game. That's going to make it really difficult on our defense. All right. Our defense is a really special defense, and we have guys out right now, and we can't afford to take a lot of plays on right now. With an offense, with a running back, our star running back being out, and not being able to have that familiarity with that offensive line, for run fits and finding where the holes are going to be and kind of being able to predict what's going to happen, because it does take on a personality, right? When you got your linemen in front of you, or 5 down linemen, you know what they like to do. You know what they're going to kind of do as a running back. You get to know them throughout the season. So 2 weeks of practice, cool. I hear you. We got the new guys, the guy coming back. He's got his 2 weeks of practice in. The younger guys, they have not really seen game time like Tyler has. So that leaves us at a distinct disadvantage, a huge one. And we're going against a defense that, in the Wildcats, where they've had a significant number of takeaways this season, right? So for us to be one-dimensional, for them to make us one-dimensional and turn to our passing game, where our star receivers are tight end, that makes it really difficult for us to move the ball, if at all, this game, and puts a tremendous amount of pressure on our defense, more so than it already is. I mean, we know we are defensive and special teams heavy this year. We're relying on those guys heavily, especially since the break. My God, we've really relied on those guys significantly. And to add even more pressure on them, that's a real monumental task for these guys. So that makes our offense one-dimensional. And hopefully the new kid that's coming in, the young kid that's coming in, will do a great job for us. And he'll get out there and he'll do what he normally does. But you know how it is. You get out there, it's your first time really out there in a bowl game, or first time doing anything. The odds are not in our favor, not with the run game, not at all.
Kentucky lost to the number of 15, 20, and 26 teams in the nation in total offense. Iowa, Dave, is ranked number 123 in the nation, and teams that had 400 yards against UK went 3-1. The loss being Kentucky's one-sided win over LSU, which LSU ran up and had a bunch of yards on them. But teams with fewer than 400 yards went 0-8. Iowa, meanwhile, reached 400 yards once all season, and that was in a 30-7 win over Kent State. So this team has depleted their top rusher for the season. And I didn't make mention to the fact that as of right now, there still hasn't been named a starting quarterback. So a starting quarterback has not been named for the game tomorrow. We'll get into that in a second, but there's a couple different things, man. The odds are stacked against this Hawkeye team. I mean, like I made mention to, this Kentucky defense, this Kentucky team has not lost to a team that has had less than 400 yards of total offense. This Hawkeye team has only gotten there once this season. What does this team need to do? What needs to happen for this team to get a win tomorrow?
Well, the Iowa that we know, I'm going to say we need to have a different Iowa show up, right? What we need to do is that everybody says, we're going to get, let's change that narrative. That's what needs to happen. It has to be something that, hey, something we practice that other teams aren't prepared for us to do. When I looked at the Michigan game, on the second down, they were run blitzing us because they knew what was happening. They knew we were going to run the ball. Like I said, it was almost like they knew what we were going to do. We cannot be predictable. We need to get out of our comfort zone and start doing things that are, we'll call statistically, not what people think we're going to do. It's really simple, right? Our offense ranks near the bottom in all of college football. And we're still 10-3. just imagine what it would be if our offense was, ranked toward the middle. Heck, they didn't have to be at the top. Be ranked toward the middle. We're 10-3 this season, and I don't know about you, but for me, it feels a little bit like a letdown. We're 10-3, and it still feels like a letdown. The two losses that we had against Wisconsin and Purdue, those are two games where we were projected to just roll over these guys. We were 80% favorites to win. And not only did we go out there and lose, and I'll say it this way, I don't believe in, bad wins, but I definitely believe in bad losses. Those are some bad losses. We got handled. They systematically and methodically dismantled us. And we need to come out with a different mentality, a different scheme, something different to kind of change the narrative. Because right now, people know what they're going to get and they're prepared for us.
No question about it, man. No question. And I will say this, David, in all fairness, I got a chance to watch, obviously, the bowl games. So got a chance to watch yesterday. Purdue take on Tennessee, high-scoring affair. Purdue did get that win against an SEC team, 48-45. And then Michigan State, I'm sorry, I didn't even say Michigan State. Wisconsin. They ended up beating Arizona State 20-13. Why is that significant? In my mind, the two losses that we talk about during the middle of the season, Purdue took down two number 2 teams this season, unprecedented. And then Wisconsin, they actually turned out to be the number 1 rush defense in the nation this year after that game against Arizona State. So we faced two very tough teams, and the Iowa Hawkeyes faced two very tough teams against Purdue Boilermakers and the Wisconsin Badgers. And at the time, coming off of the big win against Penn State, it was unsure as to how good these teams were that we took those losses against, right? Because Purdue, at the time, I don't know what the record was, but they weren't considered to be at the level of beating a number 2 team, which they obviously did. But then they went on to do again later on in the season against Michigan State. So that Purdue Boilermaker team has proven to be a very good team throughout the season. Again, like I said, winning against that Tennessee Volunteer team in overtime in that bowl game. And then Wisconsin, like I made mention to, man, that was a tough game going up there into Madison for the Hawks. And really were unable to get things going, both on the ground. But I think that was the opportunity. That was kind of the emergence of Alex Padilla. And we kind of got to know who he was. He came in the relief of Spencer Petras. And so it was, we learned a bit about this Hawkeye team through those two losses. But going into this bowl game, it's going to be interesting. I wanted to get your take on the purpose in not announcing the starting quarterback prior to the game. What does that do? Does it benefit the Hawks? Does it hurt? Does it hinder them? What does it do to them in terms of preparing for the game? Or I should say, in terms of Kentucky looking at them and preparing for the game? And then what are your thoughts on what 3 things it would take for this Hawkeye team to get a win in the Citrus Bowl against these Kentucky Wildcats?
Well, I'm going to go back and talk about the teams we were talking about that we lost against. And Wisconsin and Purdue, and you left out Michigan. And they just took us behind the woodshed and just did whatever they wanted to us then. But Wisconsin and Purdue, really good defenses, right? And defensive struggle, we know that's what it is. We had a defensive struggle too. Their offense showed up in both of those games. And I'm talking about Wisconsin, Purdue. Michigan, that's a whole other animal. So what we got exposed to when Alex came in, the offense started to move. But if my memory recalls, and I could be wrong on this, we still scored 7 points for each one of those contests, right? And that's tough. We need to start moving the ball and be very consistent, right? When I look at the Kentucky side, they lost 3 games this year too. They lost one to Georgia, when Georgia was number one. Then Georgia is a different caliber team. That team there, they have a very balanced offense, defense. They have some real playmakers out there. You brought up Tennessee, and I think that was Purdue that played against Tennessee, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Kentucky lost to Tennessee as well. That was a barn burner. They lost by 3 points, 45-42. And then Mississippi State, I think they played against Michigan State, right? And they lost against those guys 31-17. Michigan State actually had to come back to win against those guys. And I know Purdue beat Michigan State, and that's back when Michigan State was number 2. They are a solid team. They're in flux too. They're still trying to figure out who they are, and kind of like some of the things we have going on, figuring out our identity. So the teams and the quality of teams that we face, Kentucky's kind of faced similar teams too. So when I look at the two teams, they're very similar in that regard. The differentiator is that their offense is not our offense. Their defense is not as good as our defense, not even close. Our defense is special. They're going to continue to be special. Our special teams, I still think they're special too. But the big differentiator is that offense. And when you look to answer your question about the quarterback and not notifying who's going to, or announcing who's going to be starting QB, I mean, strategically, that makes a lot of sense to me. All right, we don't want to give them, I guess, the advantage of knowing who they have to prepare for. So then they got to prepare for 2 quarterbacks, which are 2 different styles. Right, Alex, we know he'll climb in the pocket, he'll get out of the pocket, he'll create some more time, he'll create some more space. Spencer, he is, he's more like a Drew Bledsoe. Right, he's going to sit in that pocket there for a minute. Right, and when he does scramble, we're holding our breath. We get that, but he's got a strong arm. He's got good mechanics. He can read the defense very well. So having to prepare for 2 different types of quarterback, 2 different styles of playing quarterback, it's going to be tougher for Kentucky's defense to hone in and say, this is what we're going to do. And strategically, that makes a lot of sense. I'm hoping that Iowa knows who's going to be the starting quarterback, and they've prepared that way for this whole time that they've had to prepare for this bowl game. But them not telling Kentucky, I'm not too opposed to that at all. Now, as far as the 3 keys for this game, we're really looking at, this is going to be a defensive battle, right? And that means that if who's ever defense can hold up the longest, is probably going to win this game. And then we're also looking at turnovers, right? The turnover battle, that Kentucky defense is going to do a really good job against our offense, trying to take the ball away. You call it all the time, your tips and overthrows, right? We getting not having Tyler there, becoming more one-dimensional, right? More to the pass. That's going to open us up to more turnover possibilities, right? Interceptions. So that's going to be a big deal for us. And on the conversely, it's going to be a big deal for our defense with the guys that we have out, right? Being able to create those turnovers with the new guys that are coming in. That's going to be huge for us. Our defensive line is going to do what they're going to do. Our linebackers with Jack Campbell there, we're going to be great up front with our front 7, right? Getting a secondary in the place where they're back to that Legion of Boom with the guys that we have out, because it's not always about the turnovers. It's also about the leadership that leads to that, right? Making sure guys can actually clear the pass, we'll call it a pass mistake that they made, and able to move on. And then third, I'm going to say is we need to be a little more unpredictable. Right now, our predictability is really high. Other teams look at statistics and they're scouting us, and they know what we're going to do. They look at the probability. That's why we scout people, because we pick up on the tendencies. We need to get into a position where we're scouting ourselves, or we have scouted ourselves, and we become less predictable. The less predictable that we are, right, the greater opportunity we have of success, because the other team is not ready for what we're about to do, right? So those are my 3. What do you got, man?
Excuse me. Well, Well, to come out with a win in the VRBO Citrus Bowl game, this Iowa Hawkeyes team is going to have to create at least 4 turnovers. You need 3. You need to win the turnover margin to win most games, to win 83% of games. 4 turnovers gives them an opportunity to take away drives from this Kentucky offense that has proven that they can move the ball down the field, as well as gives more opportunities to our offense, which we know gives us obviously more opportunities to get the ball down the field and get in the scoring position. So that's key number 1. Create 4+ turnovers. Number 2, find out who your next running back is. Clearly we know the situation going into this game, and these young tailbacks will have an opportunity to prove themselves. This is like an early spring ball for these guys to find out who's going to be the next starting tailback at Iowa. So find out who's going to take the load, or if it's running back by committee and everybody really gets the opportunity to tote the rock, or if Ivory Kelly Martin takes over in his final game as a Hawkeye and really just takes it to another level, and just shows what he's had the ability of doing throughout his career. And then third and foremost, this Iowa Hawkeyes defense has been famous throughout the season in creating turnovers. This game is going to be critical for this Hawkeye defense to get after this quarterback. We already know his abilities. He's thrown for over 2,500 yards for the season. This Hawkeye front 4 has to disrupt him, has to get him off his spot, has to force him in uncomfortable situations, has to force him to throw the ball to us. Just like I said, just like you said, just like we all made mention to, tips and overthrows, we got to get those. So for this Hawkeye team to get a win, New Year's Day down in Orlando, those 3 things: find out who your running back is, win the turnover margin, and D-line has to come alive. Those are the things that are going to make the biggest impact in creating a win for this Hawkeye team against a Kentucky Wildcat team that is a little bit more polished at this point in the season with what they've been able to do throughout the season against their competition. So it's going to be interesting to find out who's going to show up on Saturday, like you made mention to, and who can fit the bill. Final thing before we get going, David, got to ask you, man. Throughout the season, we've seen it, and I would say throughout the last couple of years, we've seen it. Really, two things. One being the transfer portal. Most recently, Tyrone Tracy, who started the season at wide receiver for this Hawkeye team, has entered the transfer portal and has, interestingly enough, committed to Purdue University. So he will be a Boilermaker. For those that don't know, this Hawkeye team will travel to West Lafayette next year to face that Purdue Boilermaker team, and Tyrone Tracy will be over there wearing a black jersey. So there's that. We've had a few other guys, Deuce Hogan and some others, that have decided to part ways with the Hawkeyes. And then the other thing I want to ask you about, a couple of years ago, man, it was an interesting trend that was started by a guy like by the name of Leonard Fournette, and kind of has continued. Is this early opt-out? There are guys that feel like they don't want to put themselves in position where they can perhaps lose draft stock because of an injury that happens in a bowl game. I'm kind of split down the middle on that. I feel like a guy that has the ability to play on Sundays proves himself throughout his college career, and if he's concerned that he's going to get injured and his draft stock will drop, I understand that part of it. However, I also understand that those scouts are looking at guys in terms of who shows up to work every single day, every single Sunday specifically, and is ready to perform every single game. And those things matter. And missing a game willingly, I don't know if that's something that determines or something that that they look at in terms of draft stock, but I don't know, man. It's an interesting dynamic when it comes to it. So, real quick, your thoughts, and then we'll close it out.
Well, go back to the transfer portal. That is something that is really tough, there are all sorts of reasons why people enter the transfer portal. And I can't speak to one way or another why everyone would do it. All I do is look at things as they are, right? Um, Tyrone, when Tyrone Tracy was the start of the beginning of the season. Before we started the season, he was a leader of the team. I know he went down to the Big Ten kickoff luncheon, and he started off the season just really on a high level, on a high note. And as the season started, and as the season progressed, his utility was not maximized at all. Right? I'm not sure how many catches this man had, how many pass attempts that were actually thrown his way. There were plenty of opportunities that I saw when I was watching the games for him to be involved. I know he was one of the vocal leaders, both on the field and off the field. That's why Kirk took him down to the Big Ten luncheon. Now he's in the transfer portal, going to one of our rival schools in our conference, in Purdue. And Purdue, he's going to probably, if I had to guess, he's going to be one of the starting receivers. And he was a starter for us for a reason, because he's good. Losing talent like that really hurts, especially when that talent goes to one of your competitors. And any position that we have, we always want to maximize our talent and retain talent, right? It's not just on the field talent, it's also off the field talent. The leaders, both on and off the field, those are two different things. We want people that are leaders on a part of this Iowa football program, because it takes a lot for a young man to step up and be a leader. And you have 134 other kids looking up to you, right? Not everyone is cut to be that. Tyrone's one of those guys, I thought, just in my interactions with him and things I've seen him do both on and off the field. When we move to kids opting out of going to ball games because they want to enter the NFL draft, it's a big personal thing that I'm going to say, probably don't enter into lightly. But like you said, the scouts, they're looking at this stuff because they want to know who's going to actually be out there playing. Football is not an easy sport. It's definitely not for the faint of heart, right? We know that you can get hurt. Willis McGahee tore almost every ligament in his knee when he was out there. Came back, still got drafted, had a really good NFL career. The scouts are going to be looking at that stuff. And sometimes you have people talking to you that don't always understand the full perspective of the situation. But you also have other factors that are, contributing to that as well. So understanding who you are, understanding what your I guess your true position is, and how people are actually perceiving you versus how you perceive yourself, that might be a tough conversation that some of these kids need to have. But I'm kind of with you. I'm on the fence with this one because football is such a tough sport. And if you're a fringe guy, maybe you don't play because you're afraid of getting hurt. Sometimes you're one step away from not making it to the league. And if you are one of the marquee players, yeah, you're going to go play. Why would you not? Right? It hurts you not to play. So there are a lot of different situations to look at it, and a lot of different perspectives to look at it that say, okay, this makes sense for him to do it, doesn't make sense for him. I can't say it's just one way for everyone. Each situation is just a little unique, and everyone's situation is just a little, the dynamics are just a little different, which is going to come to a different conclusion. So taking all that into account, you really have to evaluate each individual situation independently of each other. So that's kind of what I look at when I look at people opting out early or choosing not to play. The one and done thing, that really is a basketball thing, right? The Kansas, the guys stay, and in basketball anyway. A lot of them come back and stay. They get their degree. They make sure they finish out. But that's a culture that's built there. That's not the norm. And a lot of guys, when they get their chance to get out there, they get out. So, yeah, each individual You got to look at it independent.
No question. Every situation is different. Everybody makes a decision that's best for them. And I hope that Tyler, I hope him all the best as a running back making that decision. Worked out well for Christian McCaffrey down here for the Panthers. So, I'm hoping the same kind of success for him. In terms of transferring, I agree. I think that I should say this. I feel like given the current climate of sports, a young man having the opportunity to go elsewhere without having to sit out because of whatever factors are created, I'm not against it. Particularly a situation where you may feel like you are a part of the team leadership, in terms of being a starter and not necessarily getting the opportunities that you assume that you're going to get, and then being demoted at some point. Maybe it's not the right place for you. So I hope all the best for Tyrone Tracy and his future and his future endeavors with the Purdue Boilermakers. And Tyler Goodson, I hope the best for him in this year's upcoming NFL draft. So with that, we look forward to a very competitive game at the VRBO Citrus Bowl down in Orlando, Florida, where the number 17 Iowa Hawkeyes will be taking on number 25 Kentucky Wildcats. I look forward to that game. Should be a good one. For David Porter, I'm Colin Cole. This has been Hawk Talk. It's been an awesome show. Thank you all for joining.
Go Hawks.